Hi, everybody. In this episode, I interview Steve Weston, the founder and CEO of Volt Bank, a digital bank that is disrupting the big four. He started the bank in 2018 and it's grown to now employ over 100 people, and they've raised around $200 million in capital to create a really exciting FinTech startup. He provided some really great insights on people and culture, and his story was really interesting, especially coming from humble beginnings and working his way up to the top of the banking sector in Australia. Thanks to Steve, it was really great, and I hope you enjoy the show. Steve, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your background and also maybe why you got into business in the first place?
Yeah, so Dion, I've been a long-term banker. In recent years have decided with a team to start a new bank, Volt Bank in Australia. But I actually started as a 15-year-old working as a customer service and teller in the Commonwealth Bank in Bowen many years ago.
All right, the old bank Johnny back in the day.
I was long socks and shorts and short sleeve shirts. I wasn't much of a student, and I kind of fell into banking, but found I liked numbers and liked people and helping them. And over the years, got into more senior roles. So it went from being able to help one customer, maybe with a problem or a home loan or a business loan, to being able to innovate and design products and processes that were more customer friendly. And starting with a clean sheet of paper with Volt really does enable us to change the way that banking is done for the better. So it's a long way away from the Commonwealth Bank in Bowen, I have to say. Yeah,
right. Absolutely. And were you always interested in business even when you were younger and that sort of stuff when you started that first job, or did that evolve later?
Yeah, no, it certainly evolved later. I always thinking about it, had a good work ethic from parents. I mowed lawns. I think as a 10-year-old, I picked up classes at a pub when I was 11 and 12 and worked paying petrol, and then I played rugby league, worked in a bank and was a bookmaker's clerk. So I always had something going on, which you kind of don't think about as being a kid. But yeah, that was lucky that it come from my parents. But in terms of being business savvy and entrepreneurial and that did come later.
But what people don't realise when they're doing those jobs early on is that you're learning all the basics of dealing with people, solving problems from a really young age, right? It's the best sort of education a young kid can get is actually those first few jobs.
100% it is.
It just teaches you so much, not including that work ethic, right?
Yeah, and the academic stuff for me wasn't something that happened easy, but it's a good. I am a good learning for people generally, given an opportunity, and you know I did have a very good run. Have had a very good run with banking, but also just doing the academics. You know, a guy who became a good mate said to me after 12 months of working, I said, look, young fella, I think you have some potential, but because you've left school so early, it probably is going to be hard for you to get into more senior roles. But you can do an associate diploma by correspondence because there was no college opportunities in the place. He filled out the paperwork, I did it. And I was that nervous that I was going to fail and embarrass myself. But I did get a pass, I think. And then on probably, I think 13 years later, I finished an MBA, you know, always studying during that time by correspondence. And most of the marks I got, you know, weren't what I got at school. They were high distinctions or distinctions. So just putting someone at times in a different environment, which maybe is more conducive to them doing well, and then let them build their own self-confidence. So I'm forever looking for people who just through circumstance may not have been given an opportunity, but have talent, and then give them that opportunity. And it's amazing to see what can happen.
It's interesting. I personally, not dissimilar type of pathway. I mean, when I was younger, I worked for my dad driving excavators and on the shovel when I was very young.
Yes.
Because that was sort of where we came from, regional country WA. And then much later on, when I had a family, I went and did an MBA and that sort of stuff later. So I get that path, and same sort of thing. My marks with the MBA were very good, and the not so much at school because I just wasn't interested. You know,
so
it's interesting how the paradigm shift, right?
Correct, and you know what I'm talking about. Just through circumstance, environment, opportunity, it's amazing what can happen. And you did cause me to reminisce. My late uncle had a backhoe, And even as
Right.
a youngster, I would drive. I remember wheel standing it. So we're getting off the topic of banking, but
No.
very fond memories, I have to say.
This is the grassroots stuff, right? This is where it all
Correct.
starts.
Yeah, correct.
Now, what would you say your biggest strength is in business, and how does it help you succeed?
Yeah, look, there's a technical skill, but it's not the most important, I don't think. And I have always had an affinity with numbers, and maybe those bookmaker clerking days. But I genuinely can still remember some customers' bank accounts from 1984. Now, I'm barely able to remember what I had for breakfast and the like, but always looking at numbers and the things that bankers are traditionally known for. That's a strong hand for me, so that's helped. But really, I think my key strength, and the one I work hardest on, is around people. So being able to bring really talented people together, give them opportunities and environment to do well, and quite often that do well is beyond what their own expectations or aspirations may have been. So if I was to sum up a strength, mine, I would say is the leading and working with people.
And where does that come from? Does that come from your background, sort of growing up dealing with people and that sort of stuff? Or is there, because often I find myself, having grown up in sort of blue collar type industries and that sort of thing, I found that that helped me communicate with people in different ways to what colleagues might have, and those sort of things as I was progressing in my career. Did that have any impact?
Yeah, it certainly did. I think the humbleness, the bit that you had to work, it may be a little bit harder to get ahead. But quite often when I'm doing town halls and meetings with bigger groups, when you tell that story, there are so many people in the audience nodding that all have their own story. And quite often that story of having to come from the other side of the tracks and have a crack is more familiar than most of us ever talk about. We don't do tall poppies or the like, but certainly for the greater number of people, they can relate to those stories, maybe more so than people in senior business roles that might have taken a different track. And look, people can't help where they're born and raised and what school they went to. I think that I do a fair job of treating everyone the same and giving everyone the opportunity. But there is a bit of that, wanting to give back. There's the empathy that's, having to come from the other side of the tracks and maybe work a little harder. The biggest rule for me is to see people kick on in their careers, whether they be with a Volt or having worked with them, they go and do something else. To see them do well, and that well being beyond what they could have dreamt they could have achieved, and you've had some small part in giving them that opportunity, it doesn't get better than that, deal.
Yeah. Do you find that sometimes when you're looking at new people coming on board, that is something you look for just intuitively, in terms of people who have had to scrap a little bit more than others, perhaps, or might just, because I think that speaks to sometimes hunger, just not always, but I think it's a really good indicator.
It does, and we've just recruited a dozen interns who are so energetic and passionate and bright and want to change the world. And a couple of bits of advice that I give all of the interns, and they all have their own stories, like you and I and everyone listening, and that is, look, in a Volt type bank, or even if it was a big bank, one of the majors, these kids coming out of university have done well academically. They're kind of going to find themselves in a head office role, building products and businesses and the like, by just the nature of the skills that they have. But I say, look, the very second that you can get a role in the real world, and that is going and talking to customers directly on call centres, being in operation roles, being in loan assessor roles, complaints areas, and the like, you learn so much so quickly, and you get an appreciation of the real world better than you can in an artificial world, in like a head office environment. And what happens from that time on, they will probably find their way back into a head office role. But the skills that they will learn from time pressing the flesh, with your operational staff and with customers directly, those skills can never be taken away. From that moment on, the decisions that these people will make will be better decisions as a result but it's not how they're configured. They're configured to come in and do. I said, look, stop that for a moment. Get out. The second thing that I talk about, Dion, is about the importance of being nice, and nice sometimes can be misconstrued as soft and not making difficult decisions and the like, and it doesn't mean that. What it means is being respectful, understanding that people are marching to the beat of a different drum. They've had different experiences. Something is going wrong at home today that you don't know about. So just keep all of those things in mind, and it's amazing how nice people are back to you when you're decent to them. But again, certainly in the banking world, it had been the more senior that you got, the more that your teams worked for you. So you're the big boss, very important. The teams work for you. In fact, if your mindset hasn't done a 180, and I could pass a lie detector test saying, do my team work for me or do I work for them? I absolutely work for them. And I don't say that in a BS way, I mean it. And I said to these young kids coming through as interns, if you can't get your head around the fact that when you get into managerial positions, you're there to serve a team that works with you and not the other way around, you should be looking for another job because the world has changed. So just a couple of little tips there.
Yeah, those soft skills are really underrated in business, aren't they? Yeah, really important. And in terms of biggest weakness, what you've got your biggest strengths and that, and everyone sort of tends to focus on those. But sometimes the most important thing is solving for a weakness or something like that. Is there anything that you sort of had to overcome or anything like that?
Oh, bloody oath, I could list them numerically, alphabetically. If I was to sum up the major weaknesses, one is the solving, the solution mode. Even working as a teller and the like all those years ago, I used to love getting the most difficult customer complaints and solving them. Lending decisions, you love that. And so an overplayed strength is that when Dion comes to me as part of the team and he wants to bounce something off me with like a problem, my initial way of working is you've come and asked me for your help. So barely have you finished telling me what the problem is, and I'm in a solution mode. I'm phoning someone, can you help Dion and the like. And one day Dion says, hey, Steve, I'm going to stop coming and talking to you. I actually have my own solution I was going to bounce off you, but you didn't let me get the words out. And I go, I feel wounded. I thought I was helping. Sorry, mate.
Yeah.
So I always have to watch myself there. And having a lot of experience in banking, people at the team coming up with new ideas, I immediately am thinking of all the things that could go wrong from a commercial perspective, regulation perspective, risk perspective. If I don't zip my mouth, Volt would be the most boring bank in the world. So I let the team with the ideas run with the ideas, and I provide some challenges and some suggestions. But a weakness of mine in the past has been, look, I think I'm saving you time. Let me tell you the three things that are wrong with that idea that we're going to have to overcome. Well, again, people will stop kind of thinking. So I've got to consciously zip it up, and I probably will to the day I hang up the key.
But it's funny you say that, because that is one of those things where people do have to be able to work it out for themselves, and they'll get there and they might make a few mistakes, but you got to let them make those mistakes. And you can't really, otherwise you're robbing them of the journey. You're robbing them without meaning to, because it's all well-intentioned, but you're robbing them of the experience that they're going to get from working something out, getting it wrong, falling, and letting them go through that experience. That's critical, right, to their growth.
And I've been really self-focused on that, asking for feedback from your teams about, how can you be a more effective leader over the years. And in one of the bits of feedback that I've received, and more than once, is that going into solution mode, and how it can be perceived then by your team is that Westy, which is my nickname, when Westy's happy to delegate and do all of, let us run with stuff, but you can see when it's really, really important or time critical, he'll grab it and, work overnight and knock it over. He'll do it on a weekend. And so you can see he probably doesn't trust us as much as what he may say that he does. And
right.
No, guys. If it's so important, if it gets mucked up, I'm happy to take the responsibility. And also, you have your families, and I don't want you to be, getting the balance out of whack. So I've done it myself. And the team go, well, that may be well and good, but the way that we perceive it is that you maybe don't rate us as highly as what you say. And so again, when something's really important and urgent, I have to check myself and go, let it go. And if that means that someone has to work a late night or a weekend, that's the quid pro quo. You don't want to do it too often. but certainly I've learned a lot over the years about checking myself when I'm about to go like a bull at a gate.
Yeah, it's hard to do, but it's really important, right? Because you go, otherwise, people don't grow in the same way and they just feel constrained unintentionally.
Exactly.
And in terms of what was the best decision you've ever made in business? Like, is there one sort of, especially within Volt where you are now and what you're creating, is there any one area that you sort of said that is the most critical part of what I've done?
I think always it's about the people side of things, and that is getting really talented people on the bus. And we haven't made all of the perfect decisions. Some people, particularly when you're building a bank in Australia, it hadn't been done. So the people that you are getting on the team to build are like me. They haven't done that before. They've run big bits of business or they've specialised in a certain area. And to need to make decisions at times where people aren't right for that part of the journey, or they just can't convert to startup life, or if they aren't living those values that we've got on the wall, making the difficult decisions to give people an opportunity to live them. But if they can't, then we've had to make the change, and those people aren't in the team. So I don't want to sound too brutal, but it's really, really important deal. And otherwise, particularly coming from big organisations, they all have values and behaviours, but everyone goes, but look over there and look over here. Those people are playing by different rules. So the minute you have everyone playing by different rules, kind of paint over your values because they're meaningless. They're just words. We've been very, very definite about making sure those values up there, we all live by them, and you can see when people may not, they'll be spoken to, understanding what's going on, and hopefully they can remediate. But if not, then we'll, there's another job for them.
Got to move on. And in terms of that, from a best decision point of view, is that to speaking to choosing the right people, or is it to adhering sort of religiously to your values, or is it focusing on culture? What's the key part of that?
It is, particularly with the Vault, you could easily think it's focusing on the technology is the most important thing, but taking the decision to focus on people first. They are far, far more important than technology and anything else, frankly. So just having that focus on getting the right people on the bus, and if they're not the right people at some stage, letting them get off the bus, the focus on the values. And if I think through my whole career, there is a funny story, Dion, about making decisions, but sometimes they are simply serendipity. In year 9, as a 13-year-old, all the kids had to do a week's work of work experience. And the school gave you this big list of employer groups, maybe 50 jobs or something, and you had a first and second choice. Now, my second choice was a bank, and it wasn't because I harboured aspirations of one day becoming a banker. It was because Bowen was in the tropics and was hot, and I knew that a bank was air conditioned, and I got that second choice. Now, who knows where I would have ended up had that not happened, but that was a bloody good decision in hindsight.
Smart call.
Smart call as a kid.
I would always choose the air conditioning too. I think that's a good move. In terms of biggest mistakes, what's something that you've done along the way where you sort of, or a big challenge that you faced? Anything that stands out amongst everything else?
Plenty of challenges. My first, what you would call senior manager role was in the year 2000, running home loans at St George Bank, and they were dominated by mortgages, and I had joined with a clear understanding of what the strategy would be. And within a few months, there was a lot of pressure from the investors that the strategy should change. And we just weren't ready for that. And there was a new CEO that had joined, and he effectively, the second time I went back and said, look, this strategy won't work. And I was a kid that felt like an imposter. I was 30 years old or 31. I had 1,100 people in the team. I left St George 3 years earlier. I think I had one person in my team. So I was struggling with that. And then all the focus on home loans at St George, and I was paddling. And the CEO said, look, don't come back a third time without implementing the strategy. So we did. And sadly, he passed away maybe 12 months after that time, and a new CEO come on board. And I remember having a meeting with the group executive where I thought it would be my last. And the hard questions were asked, Steve, how did we get in such a mess? And it sounds like you're kind of making the story up, or you have, no influence. Well, I said that this was going to happen, and I made it very clear. And the person who told me to do it sadly passed away, and I'm just the poor innocent person. And that was true. So I was fortunate that in those meetings where the CEO was giving me a hard time, the CFO was there, and the CFO, who was a lovely guy, stood up in front of the group executive and said, I was in that meeting with Steve. He pushed back, and he was told he would be sacked if he didn't go down this path. So it's hard to give him a hard time now. I had a strategy we put in place, and St George in that period become, certainly the most innovative in terms of building home loan products that many of us enjoy, and home ownership as a result of today. But that was a really challenging period where it was sink or swim, and at times I thought that I was going to sink, becoming a walking encyclopedia on banking and lending as a result. So there were benefits that come out of that time, but it was tough.
How long did that last, that sort of period? Because that sort of stress is no fun for anyone. Everyone's been through those periods in life, right? Well, how long did that go for?
It was probably a good 12-month period. And I was very fortunate to have a supportive CEO, a lady by the name of Gail Kelly, who would become the CEO of Westpac. And in that meeting, where I thought it would be my last, and I think it was scheduled for like 45 minutes, like usually the spots were, and it went over a couple of hours. And everything from HR to technology and marketing were telling me what we should be doing. And I was able to say, well, Dion, that's partly right, but the reason that strategy won't work is this, this, or this. And then Gail said, well, what is the strategy that you would employ if you could? And I told her, and she said, from that moment on, this is the most important thing in St George Bank. You'll get the support that you need. And she was true to her word. Now, it could have gone horribly wrong sometimes in banking and in big businesses. I just would have got the call from HR to say we're someone with a bit more experience. So that was a moment of luck, and then challenging, of course, even starting Volt Bank. Starting any business has its moments. Starting a new bank and the first startup to get a license in something like 40 years is tough. Encouraging people to change jobs to join you, and some of those move families overseas. And usually to work for less than what they were being paid in the past. We've raised over $200 million, and it's not lost on me that a lot of the people who've invested, that they kind of invest in you, or you and the founding team, as well as the vision. So there's a huge, reputational and personal responsibility on starting a business, as well as wanting to change the world and show the Australian community that banking not only needs to be, it can be done in a better way.
That doesn't really stop either, does it? That responsibility.
It's massive responsibility. It's
a continuous cycle.
It is. I wouldn't swap it at all.
No.
Mind you, but or maybe there are times at 1 or 2 in the morning where you're thinking through those ideas in the middle of the night, and those problems you're trying to solve. Occasionally you would swap it, but no, I love it.
I think everyone has that moment or two every now and again. What was the best advice you were ever given?
Probably actually in a business and a general life sense, it was from Gail Kelly. And I always had this view and the saying, treat people like you would like to be treated. And I said that to her, and she said, I think there's a little change to that. You should actually treat people like they would like to be treated, because sometimes that is different than the way that you think you would like to be treated. And I've really focused on that, and as best as I can, trying to know my team well, and what makes them tick, and where were they born and growing up, and what are their motivations. And some people want to be a CEO of a bank. Other people want to look after their family, and work-life balance is really important to them. Unless you take time to understand that, if one size fits all, and it doesn't work.
That's an amazing, it's a truism, because I know even with my own kids, and I'm going to go off track here. Marcel, we might need even to cut this out later. But with one of my kids when they were younger, I remember saying something that my mum had said to me. And she used to just say to me when I was a kid, sort of something along the lines of, oh, you're turning into a good young man. right? And I used to think that was really good. And I'd sort of, I was a young kid and I'd puff my chest out and sort of like, I'm becoming a good young man. And I would say that to my oldest son. And I didn't realize until one day he looked really sort of upset by it. And it wasn't until I sort of quizzed him on it that he took that to be that he's not good now and he's becoming good. Yeah. And just such a silly little nuance in terms of the language, because I only ever meant it to pump him up and make him feel good. But he didn't view it that way, just his own mind and how he sort of interpreted things. But I just remember thinking that that was such a disaster that my view. So, in terms of not how I want to be treated, how.
So this is an amazing topic to talk on. Yeah. And I imagine when your son told you that, you wanted to tear your heart out because
I was devastated.
It meant the very best for him. And I talk to people and myself over the years when there may be disagreements with people, and you, as the sender of the message, have said it with the best intention. But if someone has, particularly emails, have misread it, haven't got the tone, they were in a bad mood when they, and whilst there can be blame on both sides, typically, most of the blame, as a generalisation, sits with the sender, because if your message wasn't received the way that you expected it, you need to be conscious of
absolutely
say and how you say it.
I mean, I was just thankful that I had discovered it, because I could have gone another 10 years saying those same things, thinking it was a compliment, and you might have been destroying the kid's self-esteem, or you just don't know. So it was that alerted me to the power of single words and the way different people interpret things. Just so powerful. But
absolutely,
I imagine that type of thing happens every day to everyone, though. I mean, that was just one example that I caught.
It does. If you get into the psychology of it all. One of my mates is the high performance coach, I think he calls himself, of one of the NRL sides, and they talk a lot about even your personal negativity talk. You talk about the things you got wrong and that sort of stuff. You're almost 100% chance of doing it again. It does play on your mind, so it doesn't mean you make mistake after mistake and it's all la la la. It's going to be better, but don't be too tough on yourself and others, because just hearing those words, even yourself, can have quite a profound impact on yourself. There's real psychology behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's the business person that inspires you the most?
There's probably four, and two were my bosses, and I worked a bit more closely with them, and two are big tech CEOs. So Gail Kelly was one of them, and Ashok Vaswani run the bulk of Barclays Bank when I was there. Both, incredibly gifted technically, big brains with banking strategy and the like, but both were incredibly humble. Go and talk to tellers in branches and, know the staff and have this warm feel and talk to anyone, and we're not elitist in any way. And then from a big tech perspective, two guys, one called Mark Benioff, who's the CEO and founder of Salesforce. And another guy called Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft. Again, they've done remarkable things with those two companies, but they are so humble and grounded and always looking for the battler a fair go and put their money where their mouths are. And you just don't hear people say a bad word about them. That's pretty inspirational. You get to running billions and billions of dollars worth of company, and you still keep that modesty about you. Is pretty impressive. Yeah,
it's amazing, isn't it? Some of those people. Best business book you've ever read, or have you got a couple of favourites?
I've read the summaries of a lot, but there was one called Good to Great from Jim Collins, a very well-known one. Yep. And the reason I remember most about that, and I've talked about it today, and he talks about getting the right people on the bus, and it also was important, and it does sound a bit yucky and brutal, having the wrong people off the bus, and that can be for values different. Their skills don't fit the time or the business and that sort of stuff, but making those decisions are really important. I describe it at Volt as getting the right people on the bus, but creating an environment where those very talented individuals can do their best every day. And that's worthy of another half-hour podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really easy to say, and it is so bloody hard to. So that is the biggest area that I spend time, is is with the team, because if you look at the benefits you're going to get, they're not coming from me, they're coming from the team. And people, I think certainly from a finance discipline, say, do you really get benefit from spending all time with people? And we kind of know that that's right. But it's in startups, it's when at any time things go wrong and people have a choice to dig in and put their shoulder to the wheel, or they can find a reason not to. I'm off to footy training, I've got to pick the kids up, I've got a beer with the girls, or whatever it may be. You can see when you've got a good culture, people just, when they need to chip in. So there is a real payback in spending a lot of time on the people aspects of the business.
It just makes it a better place to work for everyone too, right?
A lot more fun, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And that you can't overstate how important that is, because that goes to everybody's lives, because it permeates into their personal lives, their families, their kids. It's not just sort of one spot, which is work. It has flow-on effects.
It's amazing to see people giving an opportunity of work. To your point, having the positivity of work and them going and doing stuff, then permeate into their non-work life for the better is amazing. And we also need to be conscious that sometimes it can work in reverse. So we spend a lot of time with Volt around, the personal, mental well-being. And sometimes it's not easy to pick up signs. And COVID, working from home, some of us have loved it. Others have struggled, singles living by themselves, young families with young kids where the youngsters don't know that mum and dad are actually at work now. Those things are hard, and we spend a lot of time on making sure that we're cutting people slack, making sure there's someone to talk to if they need to, and the like. And that's all about creating that environment for them to feel better and do the best.
Yeah, it's critical stuff. And in terms of a particular quote or anything, from business or leadership or life or anything like that, is there any one particular quote that you like best?
There is one, and it's come. I've worked with teams who have done some really groundbreaking stuff, both in big established banks like Barclays. It was over 300 years old, and some of its processes and businesses felt like they were 300 years old. And at Volt, where you go and do something that people may say is not possible. So, for example, Volt became the first startup to get a banking license in 2019. Since 1981, people would say to you, "It can't be done. It can't be done." So there is a poem called "It Couldn't Be Done," and what effectively it says is, "It couldn't be done, but just go about it and do your job." And it's amazing sometimes when you. And we talk about that at Volt regularly. And when we do something good, or when we've got a big mountain to hide, I'll get the team climb. I'll get the team together and I read through the poem, which can sound a bit washy, but it does get the hairs on the back of your neck stand up.
Yeah, right.
When we've done it, I ring a bell and we talk about, well, what else can't be done? Unless
It can't be done. That's the name of the poem, is it?
It couldn't be done.
Oh, it couldn't be done. Okay.
Edgar. And two surnames, I think a hyphenated surname.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. So what's next for Volt? What's coming up? What's the next part of the journey?
Yeah, this is a really exciting year for us. So the idea come out of the brain and into paper in 2017. And since that time, we spent a year and a bit getting a license, building all the technology, all the deposit products, the lending, getting them tested. We have a different way of banking where most of our customers will come through business partners, retailers, mortgage brokers, digital currency exchanges, rather than opening their accounts directly with us to wrap. So it's a very different model. And that's all ready to go. So this year is about now taking everything we've built and putting the foot on the accelerator and scaling and showing Australia initially that banking not only needs to be done in a better way and it can. And some of the things that we do there on a basic savings account, you'll get a half decent rate from most banks for 3 or 4 months, and then you'll get a really lousy rate. That's the banking of old. With Volt, what you see is what you get. It's taking on average over 20 working days, so a month, to get a mortgage approval. Most lenders, to a stage where you can go and bid at an auction or put an offer on a house. We're not too far off instant. So just some of these things that we're in the market already. We don't need to become the 5th biggest lender in Australia, 5th biggest bank in Australia, to lead by example. So why is it that Volt can do that? And how can Volt's done this? And I think it's only through new competition that we'll start to see an improvement across the banking market more generally. So
it's amazing what's coming with the banks, just like with what you're doing compared to the traditional old style bank. I wrote an article last year sometime, and I called it, it was about the banks from an investment perspective, and I just called it death by 1,000 cuts. Yes. Because basically you can see the big banks, just every product line, they're being sort of taken apart step by step. It is death literally by 1,000 cuts. And it's because everyone's just tackling the most profitable parts of their business and forcing them to reduce their margins. It'll happen slowly until it happens quickly, right?
Correct. And also then you take into account there has been a breakdown in trust over the years, but particularly since Royal Commission. So we will trust that banks will keep our money safe. We don't actually believe, as a generalisation, that they're acting in our best interest. And we can see that. Why is it you give me a good deposit rate for a few months and then a lousy one? Why is it that if I've been a loyal mortgage customer for a couple of years with a variable interest rate, I can get 0.5% cheaper if I went back to you, my same bank, to borrow the same amount? That kind of doesn't feel right. And with fintechs in particular, carving out those profitable niches with better deals. There's going open banking, showing customers where they can get a better deal, and then make it easier for that to happen, and overcoming the inertia that stops people from swapping. I'd rather be on the side of a new player in banking or financial services than I would the incumbents. Look, they have a lot of customers and big pockets. They're not going to go anywhere quickly, but it's going to be good fun to shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, no, we've seen it happen in every other industry just about as you go through, and financial services, one big one that's really yet to fall properly. When you go through media and you go through different aspects of business, it's every decade has another one that the incumbents get a bit too complacent, and the disruptors come through and cut their lunch. So good luck with it all, Steve. It's been great talking with you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us, Dion.